Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Part 4, Chapter 10. Pestsov, who liked to discuss a question thoroughly, was not satisfied with Kuznuishev's interrupting him. He felt that he hadn't been allowed to express his thoughts sufficiently. In speaking of the density of the population, I didn't intend to make it the principle of an assimilation, but only a means, said he after the soup, addressing himself particularly to Alexey Alexandrovitch. It seems to me that amounts to the same thing, replied Karenin slowly. In my judgment, people can have no influence over another people unless they are superior in point of civilization. And that's precisely the question, interrupted Pestsov, with so much ardor that he seemed to put his whole soul in defending his own opinions. How is one to recognize this superior civilization? Which, among the different nations of Europe, shall take the lead? Is it France, or England, or Germany? Which shall nationalize her neighbors? We've seen the Rhine provinces nationalized by the French. Is it a proof of inferiority on the side of the Germans? No, there's some other law, he cried in his bass voice. I believe that the balance will always turn in favor of the true civilization. But what are the signs of this true civilization? Well, I believe that everybody knows them. But are they really known? Asked Sergei Ivanovitch with a subtle smile. One willingly believes for the moment that civilization does not exist outside of classical instruction. We have furious debates on this point, and each side brings forward proofs that are not lacking in value. Are you in favor of the classics, Sergei Ivanovitch? Said Oblonsky. Shall I give you some claret? I'm not speaking of my personal opinions, replied Kuznuishev, with the condescension that he would have shown a child as he reached his glass. I only pretend that the reasons alleged are good on both sides, continued he, addressing Karenin. As for my education, it was classical, but that doesn't hinder me from finding the classical studies do not offer unexceptional proofs of their superiority to others. The natural sciences tend just as much to the pedagogical development of the human mind, replied Pestsov. Look at astronomy, botany, and zoology, with the unity of their laws. That's an opinion that I cannot share, replied Alexey Alexandrovitch. Can the happy influence on the development of intelligence be denied in the study of the forms of language? Ancient literature is eminently moral, while unfortunately for us the study of the natural sciences has been complicated with fatal and false doctrines which are the bane of our time. Sergei Ivanovitch was going to reply, but Pestsov interrupted him with his deep voice to demonstrate with excitement the injustice of this statement. When Kuznuishev at last had a chance to speak, he said, smiling, to Alexey Alexandrovitch, You acknowledge that the pros and cons of the two systems will be difficult to establish if the anti-nihilistic, let's call it by its right name, moral influence does not militate in its favor. Undoubtedly. We shall leave the field more free to both systems if we do not look upon classical education as a sort of pill to be offered freely to our patients as an antidote to nihilism. But are we perfectly sure of the healing properties of these pills? This made everybody laugh, especially the big Turovtsuin, who had tried in vain to be lively until this moment. Stepan Arkadyevitch had been right in counting on Pestsov to carry on the conversation, for Kuznuishev had hardly finished with the jest when he replied, One cannot well accuse the government of proposing a cure, for it remains to all appearances indifferent to the consequences of the measure it takes. It's public opinion which directs it. I'll quote an example. The question of higher education for women. It must be looked upon as dangerous, since the government opens the public lectures in universities to women. And the conversation turned upon the new theme of the education of women. Alexey Alexandrovitch expressed the thought that the education of women was too much confused with their emancipation, and could be considered dangerous only from that point of view. I believe, on the contrary, that these two questions are intimately connected, said Pestsov. Woman is deprived of rights because she is deprived of education, and the lack of education tends to the absence of rights. Let us not forget that the bondage of woman is so ancient, so interwoven with our customs, that we are very often incapable of understanding the legal abyss that separates her from us. You speak of right, said Sergei Ivanovitch, as soon as he had the chance to put in a word. It is a right to fulfill the function of jurist, of municipal councillor, of president of the tribunal, of public functionary, of member of parliament. Without a doubt. But if women can exceptionally fill these functions, wouldn't it be more fair to give it the name of duties instead of rights? A lawyer, a telegraph employer fulfills a duty. Let us say, then, to speak logically, that women are seeking for duties, and in this case we shall sympathize with their desire to take part in man's work. That's fair, affirmed Alexey Alexandrovitch. The principal thing is to know whether they are capable of fulfilling these duties. They will be certainly, as soon as they have been generally educated, said Stepan Arkadyevitch. We see it. And the proverb? Asked the old prince, whose little scornful eyes shone as he listened with his conversation. I may repeat it before my daughters. Woman has long hair. That's the way we judge the Negroes before their emancipation, cried Pestsov with dissatisfaction. I admit that what astonished me most, said Sergei Ivanovitch, is to see women trying to undertake new duties when we see, unfortunately, that men shirk theirs as much as possible. Duties are accompanied by rights. Honor, influence, money, these are what women are after, said Pestsov. Exactly as though I solicited the right to become a nurse, and found it hard to be refused, while women are paid for it, said the old prince. Turovtsin burst out laughing, and Sergei Ivanovitch regretted that he was not the author of this pleasantry. Even Alexey Alexandrovitch himself smiled. Enough of nurses, said Sergei Ivanovitch, but women. But what about young girls without any family? Asked Stepan Arkadyevitch, who, in taking Pestsov's part, had been thinking all the time of Chibisovaya, his little dancing girl. If you look closely into the lives of these young girls, interposed Darya Alexandrovna, with a shade of bitterness, you will doubtless find that they have left a family or a sister, and that women's duties were within their reach. Dolly instinctively understood what sort of women Stepan Arkadyevitch meant. But we're defending a principle, an ideal, answered Pestsov in his thundering voice. Woman claims the right to be independent and educated. She suffers from her inability to obtain independence and education. And I suffer from not being admitted as nurse to the foundling asylum, repeated the old prince, to the great amusement of Turovtsin, letting the large end of a piece of asparagus fall into his sauce.